Well, welcome to our garden. I wanted to try to find some way that I could share this space that I've been working in and playing in for a number of years now. Wanted to find some way that I could share this with those of you here at the conference. And so this idea has unfolded. My friend is the man behind the camera. So I'd like to first of all honor him for his assisting us in this project. I'm standing in our front yard here, and beyond me you see the gardens that we're going to visit. But before heading out, let's just start here with some of the plants that have chosen to be in a certain area in close proximity to the house and how that has unfolded. And let's start with the bone set. Is an herb. It is known as a bone set. It chose to be here next to the walkway, and it's a very powerful medicine plant. Bone set is named after a certain kind of flu called bone set flu. So we use tinctures of this plant to work with flu, colds, and so on and so forth in a tincture form. This is bone set. So last year, when I wanted to make some tinctures to work with people who had the flu and colds, this plant called me and showed me just exactly what I needed to do to create a medicine, and it works very well. So this is bone set. In the background here is a plant that also has planted itself here with the aid of cats. We have 4 cats. This is catnip. The cats, however, they've moved this plant from where it was originally probably 100 yards away. The cats were able to move it here, and maybe through eating it and through ingesting seeds and then pooping out the seeds, they have planted the catnip close enough that they can enjoy it without moving too far away from the house. So just to begin to show you how when we work with plants in a sacred, harmonious way, we listen to what they have to say. We listen and we watch, and we allow ourselves to step out of the way of our need for control and allow things to unfold. And in this way, we can be much more peaceful without this need to have things exactly the way that we want them. We can allow things to be the way that they want to be. Just quickly, talking about a couple more of the plants that have chosen the place that they want to be. This is called Artemis absinthium. It's a silver-leafed plant. It is medicinal. It's the plant that is used to make absinthe, a classic narcotic drink that was a favorite of many of the painters. Van Gogh's choice medicine was absinthe. I believe also Monet and many of the others had visions when they drank medicine that was created from this plant. Artemis absinthium. Absinthe is a classic narcotic drink. Next to this is a plant called bee balm, chosen also to be here next to the absinthium, growing very nicely together and creating a nice balance of a silver green with a light green and dark green. And here, just this year, having planted itself here, another one of the medicine plants, Angelica. Very sweet medicine, useful medicinal herb. Many of the different plants, part of their medicine, to introduce you to some of the medicine, if you, in communicating with many of the plants, a lot of their medicine is in their fragrance. And this one, absinthium, to communicate with this plant, it's perfectly okay to pinch off a flower or a leaf and to allow yourself to communicate through the sense of smell. And this is part of the way that this plant communicates, is through the fragrance of the leaves and the flowers. It's also the way that the Angelica communicates. If you just rub her leaves and inhale, you will experience a form of communication through the sense of the fragrance, smelling the fragrance of the plant. This is bee balm. It's preparing to flower, very well loved by bees. It's part of the mint family, and also has a very special fragrance. And you can get to know these plants through the way that we communicate also with one another, with humans, and that is through the sense of sight and touch and smell and taste. In other words, creating relationship. The plants are here to have relationship with us. If we're open to the understanding that we're all part of the sacred web, and that the plants are no more, no less than the humans, the animals, the sun, and the stars, that the plants are very loving beings, very sensitive beings. Arthur has been giving you a view of our front lawn, and our front lawn, as you can see, is filled with wildflowers, and some might say that it's weedy. What happens is that we early in the season, we have some intention of creating a lawn space where we can have something that looks like a lawn. And then what happens is that the wildflowers begin to grow up, and we can't cut them. Something happens, and we can't mow them down. And so so we say that we will cut them when the red clover finishes blooming, but by the time the red clover finishes blooming, something else is blooming, and then something else is blooming. And so usually we don't cut our grass, our lawn, until everything is finished blooming, and that usually is in late August, by the time everything kind of turns brown and most of the season's flowers are finished. One of the things that we notice about the wildflowers is that they all are blooming in turn. Nothing comes out and blooms all at the same time. Everything takes its turn, has its own season of just the right amount of light, the right amount of heat, the right amount of rain. And so what we find in looking at wildflower fields is once again allowing ourselves to stand back and just observe, to allow the mama pacha, the nature, to unfold. We have a sense of great harmony. We have a sense of an intelligence that is almost beyond our comprehension, and that this intelligence we can watch, we can observe it, we can be part of it, and that this is a very sacred way of being with this. So this is the front lawn, and it's just unfolding exactly as it needs to. The stone apacheta here is in the process of creating, being created, and we're working with this space. There are the stones that choose to be part of this this sacred space come from many different areas of this land. Just to talk for a few moments about this sacred space here, which is this ongoing creation, and just to let you know, there are a number of animals, parts of animals that have been buried here that are also what we might call or animal spirit beings that I have been fortunate enough to be able to work with and to listen to their teachings and to their wisdom. The deer and the red-tailed hawk are both here in this space, and those there are some very special stories about each one of the animals that are buried here, and I could share that with you at some other point in time, and I'd like to do that, but right now I think we'll be heading out to speak a bit more with the plant spirit beings. So let's go this way. So the second part of our tour today is going to be in the vegetable garden. This is covers an area of approximately 1/4 of an acre, and just going to kind of ramble out here, see what comes up, see what the plants have to say, and the first plants that we're visiting here are bean plants, and I guess the reason I'm going to talk about beans is that we just spoke about the deer being one of the animals that I work with. I hesitate to say the word work. I prefer the word play, and I could delete the word work. Somehow the word work has a tendency to mean something that requires something. So let's just say play. And so in being in this field of play and speaking about the beans last year, the deer came to me with a very special teaching, and they came to me with that teaching when they ate all of the young bean sprouts and kind of chomped them down. They didn't seriously affect the plants, but there was probably affected the harvest somewhat. So I was reminded by the deer of a certain organic control that we use to kind of keep the deer somewhat away from plants that we're hoping to have a good harvest from. So there's plenty for the deer to eat in the surrounding areas, and we see them here all the time. One of the organic methods that we use to keep the deer from eating our plants is that we pee on sticks or logs, and the deer, smelling the urine from great distance, have a tendency to stay away, but they kind of get used to it after a while, and will come into the fields and still enjoy beans. I've noticed lately they've eaten some tomato plants and some of the potato plants, and they've eaten mustard and many others. Corn. They like to eat the tops of new corn plants. So we use peeing on logs as a form to kind of, as a way to keep them away a little bit. This is organic gardening. Everything here is organic. I don't use any pesticides or herbicides. Not that I have any particular belief about those, except that I feel that I prefer to eat food that hasn't been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides. And I've noticed also that any kind of that being that intrusive into the space kills a lot of other animals, a lot of creatures, a lot of bugs, and so in trying to keep this place as playful, as free, and as open and as possible, and in working with the plants, in listening once again and observing, I find ways that we can work with this. So that's how the beans got me started on that. And so what you see here are beds of onions. I grow a lot of onions, a lot of potatoes, a lot of tomatoes. Reason being that those plants, we can eat those through the winter, process the tomatoes, have onions to eat, potatoes to eat. Most things that I grow because I like to grow them, because they're fun to grow. Some of them are good to eat. Many of them have medicinal qualities. And all of them, I have some, what I would call an ancestral relationship that goes back many hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about from here on out, is this shamanic relationship with the plants. And just looking from here, we see a lot of the taller plants that you see here. These plants are of the Artemis family. They're called Artemisia vulgaris, or mugwort. So just for a moment, I'd like to speak about my friend here, Artemisia vulgaris, the mugwort plant. This is also a medicinal herb. Has a very, very nice fragrance. Is very useful for dreaming. A dried plant in a pillow, or as part of a sachet of other plants, very useful for dreaming. This plant is also smoked at times, and it grows everywhere. When I first started playing in this space, I planted a couple of seeds, and as you can see, it is in the process of taking over the entire space, and without controlling it somewhat, soon the entire quarter of an acre would be this plant. So it's a wonderful plant, very tenacious, very useful, and what we might also call somewhat invasive. But a very good friend of mine, and that's the reason that you see lots of it here. I love it. It's just one of those beings that's somewhat invasive. So let's move on a little bit and look at some other parts of the space here and talk about a few of these other beings. And I think I'll go to this section of the garden right here. This is called heliotrope. It's also known as valerian, and from this plant, from the roots of this plant, we may create a tincture of Valium, or a sedative. In my own experience in working medicinally with this plant, I like to smell the flowers. Very beautiful plant, very stately, very nice, and it is, as far as the medicine of this plant is concerned, is not something that that I work with. I've tried it. I've made tinctures, and it actually keeps me awake at night, and so I choose to not to work with the medicine from that plant. However, a lot of people do. Valium is a medicine. It's used very often in pre-op and other ways that it's used in modern medicine. Valium is made from the roots of this plant, and you can see my friend Artemisia vulgaris here growing up, planted itself here. And here we have a plant called borage. This plant is also medicinal in many ways. Smoked sometimes for some psychic enhancement. This plant, one of my favorite plants that I've started working with just a couple of years ago. This is the Nicotiana rustica, otherwise known as native or wild tobacco. And it will begin to put a flower stalk up, very beautiful flowers, attracts hummingbirds. The Nicotianas are very special trumpet-shaped flowers that attract hummingbirds. And but I will take the flower stalks and I will cut the flower stalks off. The reason being that the leaves will become very large, and also the alkaloid, the nicotine alkaloid, will become more concentrated in the leaves. The concentration of nicotine in the leaf of this plant is about 20 times stronger than the alkaloid concentration would be in commercial tobacco. However, the plant has no addictive, there's nothing addictive about the plant. Addiction comes from the human sense of the compulsion for whatever reasons, but to work with tobacco, and hopefully I will have some tobacco with me in the workshop, and we'll be able to share this. We'll share the experience of the plant and possibly share even ingesting through smoking this plant. It's a very revered, maybe one of the most revered plants among all the native people, and I had always wondered at and had some conflict about it because I'd always considered it to be something that was harmful. So it was my attitude, a mindset and an attitude, a belief that I had that kept me separate from being able to communicate, to understand, and to work with this sacred tobacco in a harmonious way, doing medicine work with tobacco. Many other herbs here in this section that are just that come up from year to year. Much of this garden is planted, and much of it is wild, and a very large part of it are plants that I have put in at one time or another. They've gone to seed, and now they just show up wherever they feel like showing up, and I allow that to happen. It works for me. When I see something growing somewhere, it becomes magical. Some of the magical plants I'd just like to share with you for a minute. This is corn, of course, growing here, but in between the corn are Brugmansia plants and daturas. Brugmansia and daturas, both very powerful medicinal plants. Many of the medicine people in Central and South America and in Mexico are able to work with daturas and brugmansias in a way that promotes healing for themselves and for others. I grow the plants. They have very beautiful flowers, and my relationship with them is one of growing them and being with them, enjoying the flowers and having the flowers be here for hummingbirds and other creatures. However, there's a great danger in ingesting either of these plants, and so that isn't something that I'm doing now. But I think if I could learn from a medicine person how to go about this, or have someone to supervise me, that would be something I would be interested in. But my understanding about people who have experienced the medicine of these plants is that it's very disarming, and sometimes and actually can be fatal also. See, the daturas are getting ready to really bloom a lot. This one is blooming here now, and you can see this is called Datura stramonium. It's a trumpet-shaped flower with a 5-point star. Very, very beautiful, and you can see the leaves, the pointed, serrated leaves. Very strong plant, very invasive plant, really able to take over. What I will probably do this year is to, before this plant is able to begin to spread seeds, and sometimes it'll be spreading seeds before I know it, before I can get to it. I probably will take all of these plants out, not allow it to seed so much out here, because I don't want it to take over. Just wanted to share with you all just for a moment. This is actually grass, and as I was here in this section of the field in the spring, I saw the grass growing in these clumps, and it spoke with me and said that I should just watch it. Don't cut it to the ground and try to get rid of it. Just to be with it and to allow it to show itself. And so it has created this out here in the middle of the rest of this garden space. This area is one that is just somewhat wild. I mow here and there, but it's mostly a wild space. In fact, the whole thing is mostly wild space in one way or another, because it gets away from me, and I can only do so much. But anyway, so this is allowing the grass, just allowing grass to grow and to begin to have this idea that grass is more than something to mow and then to have a lawn. It is a being that has flowers and has seeds and has life, and is very, very, very beautiful, very spectacular display of grass in the middle of the garden. We don't see it anywhere else in the field here. It could be several years ago I planted a certain kind of grass that supposedly is a psychotropic plant. You can alchemically create a psychotropic medicine from it, and so it's possible that that's what this grass is. That it is not native. That it has. We call this, I believe it's called reed canary grass. It's possible that that's what that is. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, it's beautiful, and that's the reason that I leave it there, because it's fun. It's fun to watch grass grow. Okay, in this section of the garden here, this is basically rows of tomatoes, many different kinds of tomatoes. Some of these tomatoes, I don't know what varieties they are. They're seeds that I have kept, and then what has happened is that somehow they're seeds, and so I plant them, and they come up, and I call them unknown, and then I put them in, and then as they grow, I get to know them. I can figure out what varieties they are, and then in that way there seems to be something different that happens, some kind of a different relationship with them. It isn't as though they are a particular variety. They're an unknown variety, and then I get to know them in a different way. Maybe I could call them anything that I want. I guess I could. Why not? But what I want to show you is this little section of the garden right here is about 12 feet. And in this 12-foot section, I had lots of packages of seeds from different years of different plants that I think I had not been very successful with. I tried starting them from seed and things like that. Hadn't worked that well. So I just threw a bunch of seeds in here and kind of scraped them all in and called this miscellaneous unknown. And so this is the miscellaneous unknown, and what has happened is different things have come up in here, and I don't know what they are, but they're very interesting, and I probably will be able to learn what they are, because when I get around to it someday, I'll begin to look up what plants, what certain plants look like. And I have some sense that there's some ephedra in here, which is a medicinal plant. I don't know what it looks like. I have a sense that it's this plant here, which looks like little small buds of mushrooms, and then it opens up into cups that are filled with seeds. So this is really a lot of fun to have something that you don't know what it is. You're not controlling it. You're just watching it, observing it, and playing and learning. And that's about all there is for me. So there's some very special plants here. This is a datura that is a different, I know that this is datura because I know the leaf of the datura plant. This is not a datura stramonium. This is another datura. Probably grows better in Mexico. This is a shamanic plant, a medicinal plant, has a psychotropic quality to it. And just to be with these plants, to be around these medicine plants, to be around these magical plants, these plants of great spiritual power, is in itself a special experience. Just to experience the plant. You don't necessarily have to ingest the plant, but to experience its being and to listen to it as a teacher, that it has something to teach us, and if we're open to it, then it will teach us. If we're open to it being a teacher, if we're not looking at it from a place of a belief and a mindset and an attitude that we are humans and these are plants, and we are humans and these are animals, and that is a stone and I'm a human. When we understand that we're part of this great web, we open up to the possibility that everything is a teacher, that each moment is a teacher, that each being is a great teacher. We also then understand that we are also the teacher and the student, and we're in sacred relationship of teacher and student and teacher. And this is relationship of oneness. So these plants, there's some other beautiful, beautiful plants growing in here. I don't know exactly what they are. I think that the plants that I put in this section here were mostly shamanic, medicinal plants that have some psychotropic, psychomimetic possibilities. So that's what's here. I'll figure these out later. I think there are probably some sage growing in here. I can see that there are obviously some tobacco growing in here. So this is the unknown miscellaneous, and this is one of my favorite parts of the garden, is the unknown miscellaneous, because it feels to me like it's just more fun. It's more fun. Of course, the tomatoes are doing very well. They've really enjoyed this year. Plenty of heat, plenty of rain, and we'll have lots of beautiful, wonderful tomatoes, part of the Solanaceae family. They love the heat, and very special and very, very good friends, tomatoes. In amongst them you might see some pepper plants, and all over the place here you'll see this one particular plant. This is a weed. It's called Galansoga, and I'll just share this with you for a minute. This plant is, I'll pull this one up. It doesn't matter. I could pull up 1,000,000 of them, and there will be 1,000,000 more of them tomorrow in the same space. My understanding is that 20 years ago, there were no Galansoga plants in Vermont. That this plant existed in the south has been traveling north now, and is the scourge of Vermont gardeners and farmers, in that it virtually is indestructible. Although I suppose if you wanted to use herbicides, you could probably destroy it, and we don't do that. So we get to deal with zillions of Galansogas But I have a great respect for this plant in that it is so tenacious and it survives because it has so many ways to survive. Its numbers are one of the ways it survives, and you can pull it up and throw it on the side and come back a few days later and it's as green as it was the day you pulled it up. So you finally I just give up and let it be there and hope that I'll have some harvest other stuff. Okay, so we're standing here today and we're at the gourd trellis. First time I ever worked with gourds, I was about 10 years old, and one of my schoolmates, girl in my class, gave me some seeds, and I took them home and threw them alongside of the house, and these enormous vines grew up, and out of these vines, these beautiful flowers, and out of the flowers, these huge dark green, beautiful, magical gourd beings came out of that. And that was my first experience with gardening, and I've been fascinated by them ever since. So I'm still fascinated with gourds, and didn't think they could be grown in Vermont. Several years ago, in working with some of the ancestors, they told me that I should be growing gourds, that there's a very strong ancestral connection with gourds. We've been using many hundreds of thousands of years, and so this is the gourd trellis, and they taught me about how they like to grow, and they like to grow on a trellis of this sort, and as we've done so for many thousands of years, we put this together with sticks from the local woods. What I'm doing now is just tying up one of the vines which kind of gone astray, and I just tie them onto these tree limbs, and then they work their way up. And what they like to do is they like to grow up. They will cover this trellis, and then the gourds will hang down from the vine, and this will stretch out long necks on these gourds. Very useful for dippers and shakers, and for any kind of artwork that you'd like to do with the gourd plants. This is actually a gourd and datura garden. The daturas were in this area last year, and they planted seeds, stayed over during the winter. This space I set up here for gourds this year. When I saw that the daturas were part of this, I just let go of pulling them out, and what has happened is the gourds are growing up and they're vining around the daturas, and what we have is a nice wild area. The datura is making the trumpet-shaped purple flowers, and the gourd flowers, which you see now, are closed in the afternoon. In the evening, as soon as it begins to cool down in the evening, the gourd flowers, very white flowers, all open. They're night-blooming plants, as is the nicotianas, the tobacco, also a night-blooming plant. We discover, in listening to the words of the ancestors, we discover that night-blooming plants are very revered by our ancestors. One of the reasons being is that the idea of light in the darkness, and also the fragrance that the nicotianas, the tobacco, and other night-blooming plants, some of the fragrances that they send out just completely cover the whole field. Very magical, very magical. So this is the gourd and datura space. In Vermont, we need a lot of strong sunlight and warm weather for the gourds to make really nice, large, beautiful gourds. And it looks like this year that that things are going well. They're flowering, and so they're already beginning to make some gourds. It's little later than the middle of July. So hopefully by September we'll have nice mature plants. They're all very similar to humans. They're all different from one another. None of them are ever quite the same. Many different colors and shapes and sizes and uses. Very communicative plants, very gentle gourds. And I grow them because I love them. They're very sweet, and I experience the ancestral connection in working with this plant. Also with the daturas. So you see, it's quite a special, magical place. All of it is special and magical. We're here a couple steps away from the gourd and datura section, and just introduce you to this plant. This is mustard, wild mustard, grows all over the place here, quite beautiful. The deer enjoy this plant. Also, it attracts bees. Very wonderful plant to have if you're raising bees, and wonderful plant to have just so that the bees are attracted to your space, and then they also will continue cross-pollinating the gourds and other plants that require some sort of cross-pollination. So let the wild things grow. Let the wild things grow. Work with the wild. Don't try to control it, because it's the boss. It's in charge. It's the mama pacha, and this is learning to be in an allied relationship with the plant beings, an allied relationship with all beings, animals, humans, insects, working in a very sacred, reciprocal, harmonious, balanced way in loving relationship with the all that is. We learn a loving relationship with ourselves because we are the all that is. We take on a separate body or identity, and this is our way of relating with the all that is. When we get stuck in the identity and we become separate, then we become incomplete and not whole. So what we're doing is returning to wholeness. This is honoring all beings, that we don't choose one is good and the other one isn't, or one is right and one is wrong. This is all based upon cultural conditioning and belief systems. What we're doing is honoring all of the plant beings. I'm standing next to a very special plant. This is called El Campaign. This is an herb that I actually planted here. Planted seeds, and every year it does something different. This year It is its third year here, and it is flowering, and it has these rosettes, just to show you these beautiful rosettes that it's producing. We use the root of this plant. I think we can also use the leaves, but the roots are used in medicine, in medicine work, creating tinctures for healing purposes. El Campaign. It is. It looks like its name. Very stately. Very like a monarch. Whole planet, absolutely, totally powerful medicine, but there isn't anything being done. There isn't even any research going on right now. But these if you eat about 20 or 30 seeds from this plant, you will be walking around doing things in an altered consciousness that you will not even be aware of until 2 or 3 days later, maybe a week later, when people tell you what you were doing. Mm-hmm. And here on the other side of the Datura and Gourd space, we have a beautiful mullein plant that has chosen to be here this year, not cultivated or planted, but just chose to be here. Standing here just a couple of steps on the other side of the Datura and Gourd area, plant that has chosen to be here is mullein. Very powerful medicinal plant. All parts of the mullein plant are used in working with herbs. Very sacred herb, grows wild everywhere. Some of the best earache medicine in the flowers, the root, a tranquilizer, and the leaves used in working with colds and flu. Once again, a plant that I recognize be here, and in this relationship, not pulling it up so that I can put something there that I want to have there, but just honoring its volunteering to be here. And this is dill, a lot of dill growing in here. Very nice herb, very fragrant, useful for pickling and putting on potatoes. Just about anything you'd like to flavor with dill. There's plenty of dill here. This is growing up. Dill was here several years ago. It keeps coming back. Actually, it is growing in the strawberry patch, which is now completely overgrown, but by the time the early winter, late fall comes along, what I will do is most of these plants will die back, and the strawberries, then I will see where the strawberries are, and I'll move them to a different space. I'll cultivate a space for them, get the strawberries ready for next year. So we have strawberries at one point, and then after the strawberries are finished, A lot of wildflowers come up, dill comes up, there's a boneset plant there, mustard comes up, and so we're just working in a harmonious way, in an allied relationship with the planet and with the plant spirit beings, learning, listening, honoring, loving it. It's a lot of fun. Another garden plot that we're in here now has some other plants. I had some packages of seeds that had been around for a few years, didn't know if anything would happen, so I just scattered them in the ground, and sure enough I have amaranth, which is a very useful grain, also a very beautiful plant as it grows and creates its seed head. Next to that, also a package of seeds that I didn't know were viable, seeds I'd had around for years. I just threw them in, and what we have growing here is basil. Basil also has a very spectacular fragrance, and growing the plant and just inhaling, being with the fragrance of basil, listening to its teaching. It is ordinarily used as a culinary herb, but it is much more. Everything is much more than we assume relative to our cultural conditioning. There's so much more when we allow it to be there, when we're not stuck in a narrowly focused field, when we open up and allow the possibilities to exist, the infinite possibility. Zucchini and pumpkins. Very nice, making very nice large vines. And of course then the nice green zucchinis and the nice, first of all, green and then orange pumpkins. These beautiful colors, this spectacular display of beauty, of spirit. Okay, now we're here with yarrow, a white yarrow, very useful medicinal plant also. Just wanted to introduce you to this plant. I cultivated this plant in this area a number of years ago, and it comes back year to year, enjoys being here, and enjoys the relationship that we have. This is the bed of beets, and this is when we're doing organic gardening. One of the tools that we use is called a row cover or remay, and what it does is it keeps bugs from getting on the small plants. Usually, when the plants are big enough, we would take the row cover off. This year, as soon as they were big enough, I took the row cover off, and immediately the deer came in and pulled up half the row of beets. They don't eat the root, the beet itself, but they love the tops of beets, and I don't mind them having some food. In fact, I'm glad that they can enjoy some of the beets. However, if I hadn't put the row cover back on, they would have finished them all off and we wouldn't get any. So the row cover has become a way that I am keeping the deer away, because they see this and they literally can't figure it out. and they don't take all the beets. Beet's a very interesting plant. The color is pretty spectacular, and if you haven't grown beets, give them a try. They're very special, and you can eat. You can eat the whole plant. You can eat all of it, and it is similar to asparagus in how good it is, and it is very good for you. So, beets, row covers, and deer. That's the story of beets, row covers, and deer. Okay, so here we are in the onion patch. Another plant, very easy to grow, lots of fun, and we have organic onions that keep all winter and well into the spring. This year I'm hoping that with a number of varieties I've grown here that we will have onions until we have onions next year. This is a variety that's called Mars, and I'm going to pull one, take it in. Very nice red onion. Organic red onion. Beautiful. Beautiful colors. Purple. Purple beets. Very special. Arthur's been showing you the potato patch. Very prolific plant, pretty easy to grow. One of the problems that we have with potatoes is called the Colorado potato beetle. Just wanted to show you these potatoes, and just for a second talk about organic control here. And the organic control of Colorado potato beetles is that you reach down when you see the larva of the beetle or the beetle itself, and without any attachment to any kind of anger or any attachment at all, but just doing what is necessary. And you know, we're honoring the insects and the plant world. We're honoring the earth and the all it is, and then we just pop the larva of the beetle or the beetle itself. In other words, we end their life without any emotion, so to speak. These potatoes are getting close to finishing their cycle, so we'll just see what's here. And there's one. This is the red potatoes. I grow several varieties. The red potatoes don't keep as long as the yellow ones. So we, in knowing this, we'll eat the red potatoes first, and then we'll eat the yellow ones. But very interesting colors, all of them red and purple. And roots. And the last section here is the garlic. Been working with garlic for a number of years, actually for thousands and thousands of years. Garlic, a number of years ago when I was working with it and taking the bulbs apart, the individual cloves we plant in October. Interesting thing about this particular plant is that it has a 9-month gestation period, similar to another group. similar to humans. And so we plant the clove in October, and then we harvest in late July or early August. And these plants, you can see they've sent up a flower stalk, and what happens is they send up a flower stalk and they'll create a very nice circle, and then as they begin to unfold from the circle, and eventually they will point into the Hananpacha. Pointing to the heavens means that they have finished their cycle. It's time to take the plant and to pull it up. Then we allow it to dry down for about 3 weeks in a cool place. Keep it in a cool place. Dries down for about 3 weeks. We have, once again, then we take a certain amount of that for our planting stock for the following year, and then we have enough garlic to eat and to give away for a year until the whole cycle happens all over again. So this is being with cycles and listening and learning about cycles, and very very special learning. I see that something has been eating all of the tops of the tomatoes over here. I don't know what that is. It looks like the deer have been eating them. I don't know of anything that eats the tomatoes. Didn't know the deer did that. It could be some kind of a worm that's taking the stems, but it doesn't seem like it's going to affect the plant. But I'm curious about what is going on there. So I'll see if there's some kind of a bug, or maybe it's some other critter that is munching on those. It's just something to learn about. One last section here is a section of cover crop. And what I do is I plant oats and clover at the beginning of the season, and the oats come up. The oats actually nurse the clover, and then I cut down the oats. The clover comes up. The clover will flower, and then at the time the clover flowers, I'll till that and plant buckwheat, and then that finishes the cycle for a season, and then I'll put winter rye on there. And by the time I have fed that section of the earth with these different plants, what has happened is the oats suppress any other plants in there except for the clover. The oats and the clover get along very well, but any other plants that are growing there, what we might call weeds, the oats keep those plants down, and they're not able to come up and put seeds down. Then the clover is fixing nitrogen into the soil. Then we till all that in. That's a lot of biomass into the soil. And then we plant buckwheat, and what buckwheat does is it creates a very nice tilth, or it makes the soil nice and fluffy. So this section where you see the garlic, tomatoes, potatoes right now was cover crop last year. You can see how lush this is. It is once again working in a sacred, harmonious, reciprocal manner where we are giving to the earth. We are working in an allied relationship with the planet, not from some position of arrogance, but a position of humility, knowing that we are a part of the great web, and honoring all of the other beings that are also part of the great web. Well, I must have gone through there with a rototiller. I must have hit these potatoes. I must have gotten into them when I was tilling, and they all have kind of a cut out of them. What a bummer. Now we've stepped out of the cultivated area and into the field, and we're standing here with one of the very sacred and special plant beings. This is milkweed, and many folks, I think, have the perception that this plant is I've heard it being called a nuisance. And when I first came to this area, my plan was to get rid of all the nuisances. And I would have had to have gotten rid of myself to begin with. However, what unfolded was I began by chopping down the field by getting a huge mower and dragged it behind my tractor and spent 8 hours. And after doing that a couple of times and seeing all of the critters, mostly huge, beautiful garden spiders and other toads and frogs and things that were living in the field, I began to open up and to listen just a bit. And the milkweed became a great teacher for me. The milkweed is the plant that is the reason for the survival of monarch butterflies. And just very quickly, the story is that monarchs come in about this time of the year, maybe just a little later, and they begin to lay their eggs on the milkweed plant. The larva then will hatch from the egg and will eat the leaves and eat the sap, the milk, the latex from this particular plant. And then they will go into a cocoon stage, which will hang down from the leaf, and then they will emerge as a monarch butterfly and continue on to places in Central and South America, where they will go through another life cycle, and then once again migrate and start the whole thing all over again. So here's another cycle. The reason that monarchs have survived so well is because the latex of this plant makes them impervious to being eaten by other birds and by anything, because it's poisonous. It is only not poisonous to the larva of the monarch. So any plant that a monarch would choose, a monarch from the animal kingdom, I could see is very special. It is also a favorite of bees. So once again, attracting the bee beings, and the bees then once again will spend a little time here, and then they will go in and begin to cross-pollinate the pumpkins and squash, other flowering plants, and it's all working very, very nicely. So milkweed, a very special ally. Actually, you can eat the flower pods. They're going by a little bit now, so you wouldn't be able to eat them now. You have to know how to cook them so that you don't poison yourself. They also have been the plant that has showed me certain circles in the field where I have created stone circles and space for sweat lodge. Yeah, go. Okay, here we are. We're still with the milkweed for just a moment. I wanted to let everyone know that there's a very special star, that the flower itself is in the shape of a star. And if you look around at a lot of these wildflowers, you will find many star-shaped flowers, and you'll also enjoy very special fragrance. Milkweed is growing all over the field here and fills the space with a very, very special fragrance. Literally, you can lay down and allow yourself to be transported on a shamanic journey to a cloud land of sacred milkweed fragrance. Don't get lost in any kind of conditioning about what is a nuisance and what isn't a nuisance. You might lose the opportunity to realize that sometimes it's the nuisance that is the sacred being. In fact, it's all sacred. Nuisance is only one narrow point of view. I like to swim in the nude in those potholes. Well, I like to swim in the nude anywhere. Now we're in a different area of the field. This is a wetland area. This is actually down behind our pond, and this has grown up in willows and in cattails and lots of different ferns and other purple vetch and some other nice plants. Just wanted to show you that we're kind of in a different space here, and also in the area where we're going to talk about another one of my plant allies, a plant that I've been hanging out with for about 40 years. Very special, benevolent, wonderful, sensual being. And this being is called cannabis. marijuana. Okay, so we're going to talk about this medicine plant, cannabis, marijuana. Very sweet, gentle, very nice ally, and very useful in my shamanic work for journey work and for visionary work. I use this along with tobacco for kawak, to develop shamanic vision, to be able to see into the unseen world, and to enhance perception of the seen world. I don't suggest using plants that you don't have a relationship with. This plant I have a very long relationship with, in many different ways, and have learned from this plant in how to work with it in a sacred, harmonious way for healing. These plants are some are males and some are females, but what has happened with the plants that I've been growing is that for years I took the males away when I could see that they were male plants. In this way, the female, the medicine, THC, is much more concentrated because the female doesn't produce seeds. All of its energy goes into producing the pods, and the THC that goes into the pod that protects the seed. What has happened with the plants that I've been growing over the years, the seed has become hermaphroditic. In other words, not male or female, but each plant, although some of the plants will produce only seed pods, but there are other plants which will produce both male flowers and female seed pods with fertilized seeds. In this way, the plant has found a way that to continue its earthly experience. Just happened to be in an area here that also produces the most amazing raspberries, wild raspberries. Just absolutely the best wild raspberries, some of them 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and no cultivation here. They have decided to be here, and they decided to be here so that when I come down to visit the cannabis, I might enjoy a little raspberry treat. So I'm going to bring these out of this space here and offer them to my friend and cameraman. Sacred plant medicine here. sun's going to come back out and grace us with another view, yet another